GrowthBook is a modern feature flagging and experimentation platform, which means it works with the latest and greatest tools. In this video, we'll learn how to build a dynamic landing page capable of experimentation with Deno, Hono, and of course, GrowthBook. Let's break down our tools. We start with the JavaScript runtime Deno, which is a modern runtime created by the founder of Node.js. We move on then to Hono, which is a server framework that works really well with Deno. And then for feature flagging and experimentation, we're using GrowthBook, of course. And all of that comes together then in this landing page for Bayes Bank, a fictional fintech company. And then let's take a look at a diagram to just see how this all fits together. So as I said, we have this Deno JavaScript runtime, which powers everything. The server layer is made up of Hono, which generates the HTML for the landing page, but that interacts with our GrowthBook SDK. And that SDK gets its data from the GrowthBook API. So that's how it knows the experimentation and feature flag values. In the next step, we'll see how to set this up. All right, let's set up our project. Let's start by using Deno to initialize a new Hono app. So I'm going to run this command to create a new Hono app, and I'm going to choose Deno as my runtime. Now that this is cloned, I'm going to exit out and go into this directory where we created the Hono app and open it in my code editor. So this is the structure of the app. So you can see it's pretty bare bones at the moment. It comes with this Deno.json file, which is very similar to package.json in that it tracks your dependencies, it has your scripts and some configuration. And then the other file to take note of is this main.ts file. So this main.ts, this is where the main server logic resides. But one of the cool things about Hono is it supports JSX, the template rendering language out of the box. So we're actually going to just go ahead and rename this to main.tsx. All right, next we're going to install our remaining dependencies. So I'm going to jump back over to my terminal and I'm going to run Deno add. So Deno add is how you add dependencies in Deno, pretty straightforward. And I am going to add Tailwind and GrowthBook. And so one of the differences here with Deno is that you use a prefix to specify which registry you want to use in terms of getting your packages. So we're using npm for Tailwind, but we're using JSR for GrowthBook. And JSR is Deno's native package repository, and it comes with a lot of nice benefits to it. Check the links below to learn more about it. All right, so both of our dependencies are now added. The next step is we need to configure Tailwind. So I am going to generate a Tailwind config with this Deno run command. So it created the Tailwind config and the post-CSS config. Next, we need to update that config. So I'm going to pop back over to the code editor, come here into the Tailwind config, and I'm going to select everything here and replace it. And what changed is that we're just telling it which content to target. And so this will be any JS, TS, JSX, or TSX file. So that means that we can use Tailwind in any of our files here. The last configuration step that we need is to add our base CSS styles. So I'm going to add a new file here, source input.css, and add the Tailwind, base styles. Save that. The last part that we need to do here is add in our development scripts. So I am going to go over to the Deno.json file, and I am going to copy in our tasks that we want to use. So we have a couple of different ones here. So we have a start task, which is just running the server in production. But we also have a dev task, and what this does is it allows for the automatic refreshing of the server when changes are made to different files. And so we have it set up for the CSS, so it compiles the Tailwind, but we also then have it set up for the server. So that is everything we need to get started on building our landing page for this tutorial. So let's do that. All right, it's now time to build out the layout for the landing page. So I made a new folder here in our project called components, and I added 4 components. I'll go through these quickly, but we have all of the source code available in a repository. Let me show you that. So this is GrowthBook examples and the Deno Hono example. All of this code is available here, so you can just copy and paste or take a look at it. But let's run through real quick what this looks like. So as I said, this is in JSX or TSX, the TypeScript version. But we have here the copy. This is kind of the copy about the website. So it's the sort of the sales pitch for this Bayes Bank fintech app. We have our footer here, and we have our nav bar. One of the things to note that's kind of interesting, like I said, is that TSX is supported here, but this isn't React. This has nothing to do with React. Hono is actually just rendering the JSX itself and producing HTML. We'll see that a little bit more in a second. But the one component that we'll be most interested in here is the hero component, because that's where we're going to implement our feature flag and our experiment. So we'll come back to this, but I just wanted to flag it that we have a GrowthBook here, which is using a feature flag. But like I said, we'll come back to that. So we have here now our 4 components. The next step is going to be exciting. That's where we get to actually implement the feature flagging and the experimentation logic in the server. So we have here an updated main.tsx file. I'm going to walk through this a little bit and show what's going on. We've imported our components, some other Hono specific helpers like serve static for serving static assets. We have this GrowthBook middleware, which I'm going to talk about in a second. Let's keep going on down here. So we define a new Hono app. We set up our static assets to be served. So these are things like the CSS or images. We come down to a layout component, and here we define the sort of shell, the layout of the page. So you can see that we have our nav bar here, we have our footer, and then a children slot where we can kind of inject things in. We keep coming down to our page layout. And this page layout here has our hero. And to that hero, we're passing our GrowthBook instance via the middleware. And so we're going to get to that again, like I said, in a second. And we come back down now to the router. And so whenever we get to the home page, we use the GrowthBook middleware. We get our GrowthBook instance, and then we return the HTML for the page rendered with the feature flags or experimentation as needed. So let's take a look at this middleware. So we have a GrowthBook middleware TypeScript file here, and this is kind of where we're defining everything we need for GrowthBook. So we bring in the GrowthBook dependency, and then from Hono, we're bringing in its cookie middleware helper. So this is great for kind of helping manage cookies. And then we create our middleware. So what we have are some things that are necessary for Hono, but most of it is just GrowthBook related. So we bring in GrowthBook and we define our new GrowthBook instance here. And for that, we need to define a couple different things. So one is our API host. The second is our client key. Third is a tracking callback. So the API host and the client key, we'll see in a second how you get those. Right now, it's just a placeholder. But for the tracking callback, what this is that when a user or whatever your kind of unit of experimentation is exposed to an experiment, GrowthBook will fire a tracking callback on your behalf. Right now, it's just a console log to say that the experiment was viewed with the experiment and the result. But if you were using something like Google Analytics or Segment or whatever kind of event tracking that you're doing, you would put that in here to log the experiment exposure, and that's what's used to analyze the experiment once it's running. Next, down here we get the UUID and via the cookie. If it doesn't exist, then we create one. Here, you might actually have a user ID that you want to use or some other kind of identification mechanism, and then you could do that however you want. We then give that to GrowthBook because GrowthBook is going to use this UUID in order to assign the experiment. So whatever this UUID is, it's going to hash it and then have a deterministic assignment for which experiment variation the user is included in. You can also here include other attributes like location or browser or whatever kind of things you want to do, which allows you to use feature flags in conjunction with those attributes. We have more about this. I'll include some links down below. And then finally, so we initialize GrowthBook with a timeout. So basically, if for some reason GrowthBook can't connect, it'll time out after a second, and the app won't fail or anything. It'll continue. It just won't have the latest feature flag or experimentation data from the API. Then we continue on to setting the middleware on the request and then forwarding it to the to the next thing. We have at the bottom here then a destroy method to help clean up everything as we go along. So this is running on every request, and this is what helps you dynamically then render the HTML that's proper for your experiment. So let's now kind of run the server and see where we're at. So I'm going to pop back on over to my terminal and run Deno task dev. So this will start a development server. So you can see that it started here and it gave us this URL to look at, and open this up in the browser. And this is everything that we just created. So there is this title here, and this is what we're going to target for our feature flag and experiment. But we have all of this being rendered through that JSX on the server, and it works pretty nicely. In the next step, then let's actually get a feature flag up and running. I'm now in GrowthBook, and the first thing we need to do is connect our app to GrowthBook. So I'm going to come down here to SDK configuration, SDK connections, and add a new one. And this will be my Hono app for Bayes Bank. And I will choose JavaScript here. All these other defaults are fine, and I'll click save. And so this has created the SDK connection. And importantly here, we have this client key, which we can copy. And I'm going to jump back actually over to the code editor and put that right in. So this is in that GrowthBook middleware file. I am going to put in the client key, save that up. And so we're now connected to GrowthBook. Now jump back over, and I am going to create a new feature flag. I'm going to call this feature flag landing page headline. And for the type, I'm going to choose a string. So what we're doing is we're targeting the headline, the main headline on our landing page, and we're going to run an A/B test for it. So the default value for it, I want it to be the default value that it is now. So this revolutionize your finances with the AI. I'm going to copy that, paste it in, and then click create. So the feature flag is now created, but we also want an A/B test. So that's really simple to add. I'm going to come down here to add rule to production. And you can see there's lots of different options here that would all be available in the app. But what we particularly want is this experiment. So I'm going to create a new experiment. I'm going to call this experiment a landing page headline test. And the hypothesis is that a more engaging headline will boost conversions. So I'm going to go ahead and create that. And all these defaults are fine. What's going to happen is that 50% of the traffic will go to one variation and 50% of the traffic will go to another. And we need to define that. I have some other copy here. I'll put it in. So 50% will get the revolutionize your finances with AI. That's the control. But then the other 50% will get save money and grow your wealth with AI. And the idea is that maybe this other headline will be more engaging in some way and boost those conversions. Who knows, but we are going to test it and see. And all this other stuff is fine. We're going to click save. I'm going to click review and publish. And now this experiment is live. So what we need to add now to the app is this feature flag value. So I'm going to copy that and jump back over to our code editor and come into our hero. And what I need to do here is update this value to reflect what we're using as the landing page headline. So what we're doing here is this is GrowthBook. So this is the SDK, and we're using one of its methods called get feature value. You feed it the key for the feature flag, and then what happens is, depending on how it evaluates the user, it'll either get the control or the variation. So let's save that, and now this should be working. This should be live. Let's jump on over to our app and refresh. There you go. So now we're being served this variation. And every time I refresh, I'm going to get the same variation because GrowthBook uses deterministic hashing to ensure that the same user is served the same variation every time they visit. So it's a better experience. What we can do though is if we open up our developer tools and we go to our application and we come over to our cookies, because that variation here is being served in the cookie value, I can change this. Oops. And so you can see based on that cookie, then it updates the variation. So let's see if I have 4, 5. So you get the idea. You can see how it works in terms of the experiment variation assignment. There you have it. You now know how to build a Deno plus Hono plus GrowthBook web app and have experimentation and feature flagging capabilities. Check out the full tutorial for all of the code and to learn more about the details and what's possible. Hit like if this helped and subscribe for more GrowthBook tutorials.